The porch was soaked in red.
Not paint, not wine, blood, thick and bright, pooling beneath her head. My knees hit the concrete before I even realized I had moved. Her name tore from my throat, raw and desperate. But she didn't flinch. She couldn't. Her eyes stared past me, past the world, locked in some silent space I couldn't reach. My daughter was bleeding out, and she didn't even know it. She didn't hear the bullet. She didn't hear the scream. She didn't hear me begging her to hold on because my daughter is deaf, and someone pulled the trigger just because she didn't respond fast enough. I remember her drawing in chalk just an hour earlier, carefree, innocent, sketching suns and stars on the sidewalk. Her world was quiet, but it was beautiful. I had only gone inside to answer a call. 1 minute. That's all it took. 1 minute for a neighbor, one woman full of rules and rage, to decide my child was a threat. She claimed she shouted warnings, that my daughter ignored her, that she felt unsafe. So she fired. She fired a bullet into my little girl's head like she was defending her property, not murdering a child who never even heard her coming. I screamed. I screamed so loud the neighborhood shook. But still, she didn't hear me. The flashing lights, the sirens, the gurney, the blood, the silence, that unbearable, endless silence. The kind only a parent knows when they fear they've lost everything. The kind only I know because I raised a child in a world that refuses to understand her. But this isn't just a story about grief. It's about fear, about ignorance, about what happens when people choose violence over compassion. When a homeowners association rulebook becomes more important than a human life. You want to know how we got here? Let me take you back. We moved into that neighborhood because I thought it was safe. Quiet streets, manicured lawns, kids on scooters, birds chirping in the morning. Everything looked perfect, almost sterile. But as a single dad raising a deaf daughter, I was just grateful for a place that didn't reek of sirens or stairs. We had bounced around before, apartment to apartment, trying to find a place where she could grow without being labeled, where she could just be herself. Her name is Valera. She's 10. She loves coloring book fairies and hummingbirds. Even though she can't hear a thing, she says she feels when something is beautiful. She smiles with her whole face, especially when she senses sunlight on her skin. I remember the first time she signed the word home after we unpacked. She took my hand, squeezed it, and made the gesture. It was small, simple, but I almost cried. Our house was on the corner, just across from the HOA president's place. That was Karen. I remember her first words to us weren't hello or welcome. They were, so, we take rules very seriously here. She pointed at the height of my grass and handed me a printed sheet. HOA Bylaws, Section 14, Paragraph 6. No chalk drawings on the sidewalk, no street play, no unsightly clutter. Art counted as clutter, apparently. I smiled politely. She didn't. But I let it go. Maybe she was just particular. We settled in. I taught Valera how to wave at neighbors, how to show her alert bracelet. She had a bright pink charm bracelet that said, "I am deaf," in 3 languages. I told her to always wear it outside. She did religiously. Every Saturday morning, she'd be on the porch with her colored chalks, drawing dragons, suns, or what she imagined music looked like. She couldn't hear the songs I played on the speakers, but she'd bounce like she could feel the beat. It was her world, safe, gentle, hers. But not everyone saw it that way. Within the first month, we got 3 notices from the HOA. 1 for sidewalk drawings, 1 for unresponsive behavior, 1 for visible loitering of a minor. They were talking about my daughter. Karen had filed every single one. At first, I tried to reason with her. I explained that Valera wasn't ignoring anyone. She just couldn't hear them. I showed her Valera's ID card, her diagnosis, even offered to have her meet in a quiet setting. Her response? I don't have time for special cases. If she can't follow rules, she shouldn't be outside alone. That night, I stared at our ceiling fan for hours, wondering if I had made the wrong decision moving here. But Valera didn't notice any of it. She still ran barefoot through the grass. She still giggled, without sound. She still believed the world was full of kindness. She was still drawing hope onto concrete every morning, unaware that someone next door was watching her with disgust in her eyes. Looking back, I should have taken the signs more seriously. But how could I have known that one day, the thing Karen hated the most would be the reason she pulled the trigger? It started with whispers, not words spoken to my face, but the kind of glances you feel before you see them. Neighbors began pulling their kids inside when Valera played in the front yard. One woman crossed the street, tugging her toddler along as if my daughter were contagious. Another left a note in our mailbox. Asterisk, teach your kid to respond. It's dangerous and rude. Asterisk. The walls of that quiet suburb were tightening. And Karen? She wasn't letting up. A week later, I came home to find Valera sitting on the steps, arms folded tight around her legs. She looked up at me and signed. Did I do something wrong? There was a violation slip stuck to the door. Unauthorized, unsupervised minor activity. I held the paper in my fist until it crumpled. That night, I wrote a letter to the HOA. I attached medical proof of Valera's condition. I explained again that she had every right to be outside, that her bracelet identified her clearly, and that we followed every safety protocol. I even offered to host a Disability Awareness Day at the community center. The response? Asterisk, while we sympathize with your situation, we must apply the rules equally. Please supervise your child at all times. Asterisk. Karen didn't want understanding. She wanted silence. She wanted compliance. But Valera wasn't the problem. Karen's world just didn't make room for anything unfamiliar, especially a child who didn't respond to her voice. And then came the police. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was folding laundry when the knock came, sharp, aggressive. I opened the door to two officers, hands on their belts. Karen had reported a suspicious child lingering near her driveway. My child, coloring with chalk 10 feet from her mailbox. They asked questions, took notes. One even smiled awkwardly and whispered, "She doesn't seem like a threat at all, sir. Sorry about this." I nodded, but something inside me cracked. This wasn't just harassment. It was a campaign. I installed a camera on the porch the next day. That week, it recorded Karen walking by, pausing to glare at Valera's chalk sketches, shaking her head like she was watching a crime scene. She muttered something under her breath. I zoomed in on the footage later. This is what happens when people don't discipline their kids. I didn't show the video. But Valera was changing, too. She stopped using her chalks. She stopped smiling at neighbors. One morning, she handed me the bracelet she always wore and signed, asterisk, they still don't look at it. What's the point? Asterisk. I held back tears and told her the point was to never stop being who she was. But inside, I was crumbling. I couldn't protect her from something I couldn't touch. Fear masked as rules. Hate masked as policy. And then the package came. No return address. Just a manila envelope with bold black letters across the front. Asterisk, final warning. Immediate compliance required. Asterisk. Inside were printouts of HOA bylaws, more evidence of violations, including photos of Valera from across the street. The angles, the timing, someone had been watching her, documenting her. My hands trembled. I confronted Karen the same day. She stood on her porch with arms crossed, sipping iced tea like nothing in the world could touch her. You're accusing me of what exactly? She said, not even blinking. I want you to leave my daughter alone, I said. Then control her, she replied, stepping back inside. That night, I locked every door twice. I didn't sleep. Valera had nightmares, silent ones. I only knew because I'd find her curled up on the floor beside my bed in the mornings. She didn't want to be alone anymore. And neither did I. I filed a formal complaint. The HOA dismissed it. I reached out to a local disability rights attorney. He promised to look into it. But we were running out of time because a few days later, Karen bought a gun. She posted it on the neighborhood bulletin board with a smug caption, asterisk, finally exercising my Second Amendment rights. Tired of feeling unsafe on my own block, asterisk. The post got 23 likes. No one questioned what she meant. No one asked who she felt unsafe around. But I knew. And I should have left right then.
Packed everything.
Vanished. But where would we go? Where was safety when injustice followed you behind white picket fences? I didn't know it yet, but the countdown had already started. And the next time someone rang our doorbell, it wouldn't be a neighbor. It would be a bullet.
It was a Tuesday.
Sunny but heavy. The kind of day where everything looks normal, but your bones feel wrong.
I don't know how to explain it better than that.
Valera was drawing again. After nearly a week of silent mornings, she had picked up her chalks, timidly tracing soft shapes on the porch. I remember peeking out the window and thinking, maybe she's healing. Maybe we all were. That hope didn't last long. Around noon, a car pulled into the driveway next door. Karen stepped out. She stepped out, talking loudly on her phone. Even from inside, I could tell she was agitated. She paced back and forth, gesturing sharply, pointing across the street. At our house, at Valera, unaware that I was watching from the window. A few minutes later, I heard a sharp crack against the front door. I rushed outside. An egg had been flung hard against the wood, splattering in slow, dripping arcs like some grotesque painting. Taped above it, fluttering in the breeze, was a note. We warned you. Next time it won't be so soft. I scanned the quiet street. No one was in sight. Just the stillness of a suburban afternoon and Karen's silhouette retreating into her living room. That was the final straw. I called the police again, this time demanding to file a report for harassment and threats. The officer who came was polite, took photos, nodded along, but I could see it in his eyes. To him, this wasn't an emergency, just a neighborhood dispute. Not worth prioritizing. I asked for a restraining order. He sighed, said there was no direct evidence of intent to harm, no witnesses. No witnesses, except the chalk lines on the concrete, the crumpled bracelet on the floor, and the fear that had taken root in my daughter's eyes. That night, Valera didn't want to sleep in her room. She came to my bed, signing softly, "Can I stay with you?" I tucked her in beside me, her small frame curled tightly, like she was trying to disappear into the mattress. She clung to her sketch pad, the one place she still felt control. On the cover, she had drawn a house with no windows and no doors, just thick, impenetrable walls. Even in her art, she was hiding. 2 days later, Karen made her final move. I came home from work a little late. Valera was on the porch again, drawing. She had made progress. There was a bird with wide, soaring wings, and a house with an open window. I smiled, feeling a fragile sense of relief. Maybe she was starting to feel safe again. Maybe we both were. Then the doorbell rang. Just a single ding, but it split the air like a blade. I started toward the door, but before I could reach it, I heard it, not the gunshot, not a scream, just a thud. A wet, sickening thud. Then silence. I ran outside barefoot. The chalk drawings were smeared with red. Valera was on the ground, her head tilted, eyes wide open, frozen in that moment. Blood was pooling beneath her, not rushing, but spreading steadily, like time itself had slowed. A neighbor was already on the phone with 911, her voice trembling. Karen stood 10 feet away, arms locked at her sides, a pistol dangling from one hand. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't crying. She was explaining. I shouted at her, she said. She wouldn't respond. She was standing near my mailbox again. I thought she was going to do something. I collapsed beside Valera, pressing anything I could against the wound. My hands, my shirt, whatever was left of my soul. She can't hear. I screamed. She never could. The paramedics arrived fast. Everything else moved in slow motion. A gurney, a stretcher, flashing lights. Her sketch pad left behind in the chaos. They rushed her to the trauma center. I wasn't allowed in the ambulance, so I followed behind, speeding through red lights, screaming prayers into the silence of my car. That night, the waiting room smelled like bleach and despair. Doctors spoke in hushed tones. Nurses avoided eye contact. A social worker gently asked if I had other family. I looked at her and asked if my daughter would survive. She didn't answer. Meanwhile, Karen was being interviewed, Not arrested, not handcuffed, just calmly explaining her side. Like she had fired a warning shot and missed. But she hadn't missed. She had hit the very soul of my life. I sat outside the ICU for what felt like years. The hallway lights buzzed faintly above me, humming like a cruel lullaby. Every time footsteps approached, I braced myself for hope or for the end of my world. Neither came. Just waiting. Just silence. Finally, around midnight, they let me in. Valera looked so small beneath the machines. Wires tangled across her chest. A respirator hissed in rhythm with her broken breath. Her forehead was wrapped tightly. The blood had been washed away, but I could still see where it had been, where the bullet had entered, grazed her skull, and shattered everything in its path. They said she was lucky. Lucky, the word made me sick. They said the bullet had glanced off her skull, just the right angle, a miracle. She was alive. But they didn't know if she'd wake up. And if she did, what would be left? I sat beside her, held her hand, and whispered every story I'd ever told her. I knew she couldn't hear me, not even now. But I kept signing with my free hand, moving my fingers like a prayer. Asterisk, please come back. Please come back to me. Asterisk. Every few hours, nurses checked her vitals, gave me soft, pitying looks, and slipped away. No one said her name. No one said justice. Meanwhile, on the news, they were calling it a tragic misunderstanding. Karen had told police she felt threatened. She claimed she gave a verbal warning. That Valera ignored her and moved toward her property aggressively. There were no witnesses to contradict her. No one to say that my 10-year-old daughter was coloring a sunbeam onto concrete. And so, she walked free, armed, justified, untouched. That night, I screamed in the hospital bathroom, into my fists, into the mirror. I smashed the soap dispenser off the wall and collapsed to the floor. My body shook so violently I thought my bones might crack. I couldn't understand how the world kept spinning, how cars still honked, how clocks still ticked, how my daughter lay between life and death while the woman who pulled the trigger slept peacefully in her suburban home. I stayed by her side for 3 straight days. I barely ate. I barely drank. I just stared at her chest, counting each rise like it was a treasure. The doctors tried to prepare me. Brain trauma is unpredictable, they said. She might have memory loss.
She might not respond the same way.
She might never draw again. Draw again. She might never smile again. On the 4th day, her fingers twitched. Just once. Barely noticeable.
But I saw it.
I jumped up, calling the nurse, signing and speaking at the same time, my hands frantic, my heart hammering. Then her eyelids fluttered, slow, fragile, like a curtain in the wind. And then she blinked. Her eyes were unfocused, heavy, but they opened. I signed her name slowly. Asterisk, it's me. I'm here, asterisk. Tears spilled from her eyes. She tried to lift her hand. It shook, but she reached for me. Her fingers brushed my wrist. I broke. I wept into her sheets, kissing her fingers, thanking God, thanking fate, thanking whatever force had spared her. But she didn't smile. Her eyes stayed wide, confused, hollow. She signed something weakly, sloppily. What did I do wrong? I couldn't answer, because she hadn't done anything wrong. The world had. The world that couldn't tolerate difference. The world that thought silence was defiance. The world that gave a woman the right to fire a bullet at a child because she didn't move fast enough, didn't flinch, didn't hear. That night, I sat with her under the dim hospital light and promised, I won't let them forget you. I won't let them call you a footnote or an accident. You're not just a headline. You're the storm. We left the hospital with more scars than stitches. Valera couldn't walk without support for the first few weeks. Her balance was off, inner ear damage, they said. But it wasn't just physical. It was as if something behind her eyes had dimmed. The light was still there, but it flickered behind fear. Her drawing stopped. She didn't even pick up a pencil. The chalks we brought home stayed untouched. She slept beside me for a month. Every soundless nightmare brought her back to the same memory, colors turning red, then everything fading to black. Karen never apologized. Instead, she moved on quietly. No charges were filed. The official record read, * no criminal intent. Acted in perceived self-defense. Case closed, *. That line haunted me more than the sound of the gunshot. Perceived self-defense, against a child who couldn't hear. Against a child who held chalk, not a weapon. We try to go back to normal. But what does normal mean when the world tries to erase your child's existence? I pulled her out of school and started homeschooling her. She couldn't be around crowds anymore. Not yet. Maybe not ever. People sent letters. Some kind. Some cruel. One envelope had no return address, just a typed note. Should have taught her to listen. I burned it. I wanted justice. I filed civil suits. I contacted advocacy groups. I posted our story online, carefully, honestly, painfully. I showed the chalk drawings, the blood, the truth. The story went viral. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want Valera turned into a symbol. But then I saw the messages from other parents of deaf children, from people who had faced violence, discrimination, humiliation. People who had been told to control their kids, to fix them, to keep them inside. We were not alone. So I kept speaking. I gave interviews. I stood on courthouse steps and told the world what it meant to raise a daughter who lives in silence, and how society punishes her for it. Valera watched some of the videos. She never said anything, just watched. Then one day, she picked up a pencil. She drew two houses side by side. One had no windows. The other had an open door, sunlight pouring through. Between them, a girl stood holding a megaphone, not to make noise, but to show a sign. I see you. That was her message. And maybe that's what we all want, to be seen, even when we don't speak the same way. To be understood, even if we exist in a world without sound. Healing isn't linear. Some days, she still flinches when the doorbell rings. Some nights, she still signs, "Am I safe?" in the dark. But she draws again. And when I see those colors filling the pages, I know she's still here, not just alive, but rising.